How's it going, guys? Thank you very much for coming out today to day 2 of this year's MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. And thank you for coming to this panel, Logos, Pathos, and Ethos Sponsorship Analytics, sponsored by Hookit. My name is Sam Smith. I am a Master of Business Analytics student here at MIT Sloan, as well as the panel lead for this panel. Joining us on the panel today, starting here at my right, is Elizabeth Lindsay, Managing Partner at Wasserman, Scott Tilton, CEO of Hookit, Sam Kennedy, President of the Boston Red Sox, Pat LaCroix, Head of Global Media and Partnerships at Bose, and our moderator, Kolga Hagen of Fanatics. Our panel is going to run 40 minutes today with about 5 minutes for Q&A at the end. If you'd like to submit any questions, please tweet us on Twitter with the hashtag #LogoAnalytics, and we'll be taking some questions that we find to be the best. Thank you guys very much, and I'll pass it over to Cole.
Thank you, Sam. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to one of the last panels of the 2018 conference. We're happy to see you guys. I want it noted for the record that we're in the massive room where President Obama spoke yesterday, and we seem to have 1/80th the crowd that President Obama had. Not surprisingly, we will still do our very best to be as enlightening and as entertaining as the president was. As impossibly difficult as that'll be, we'll do our very best. This is a topic that those of us on the stage are really excited to kind of get into today because, well, for a number of reasons, but certainly chief among them, if you sort of think about the role that data and analytics has played in our sports business over the last really 10 years, I think we're quick to think about areas of the business like Moneyball and basketball operations and baseball operations. We're quick to think about the use of empirical insights versus the eyeball test to figure out who's going to be the better of the athletes or the players. We're quick to think about the use of data and analytics as it relates to ticketing and ticket pricing and dynamic pricing. But we're not as quick to think about the use of good data and analytics and the insights that stem from that as it relates to sponsorships. And really, the sponsorship part of our business is one that has lagged behind over the last decade when it comes to the use of data and analytics to get better on both sides of the equation, to get better as a brand and to activate better and to drive greater value for the investment that you're making, and to get better as a property, as a team or a league that's taking that brand on as a partner. But the good news is that's changing. And so what we're excited to kind of jump into today is really understand a little bit of the history of that. Why has that been a challenge? Is it access to data? Is it institutional knowledge of how to do that in a pretty old business line of our space? How has that changed in the last couple of years? And then sort of what are the visions that we have for where this is going to go? We've got a great wide sort of perspective on this. We have on the stage with us, we have represented not just the brands, but the properties as well that are selling to those brands, and then even an agency who oftentimes sits in the middle of that transaction and can represent both brands and the properties themselves. So we're excited because we've filled this stage with people who can give us all those different viewpoints. So we want to jump right in. And to do so, we're going to start with something that's a little foundational to this topic, which is how has the access of data over the last several years changed so that we are bringing sponsorship now into the new data age? How has that access changed, and how has that improved things for you, given your position in this kind of equation? And Pat, we're going to start with you on the brand side.
Yeah, I think beyond the obvious of, it makes us all smarter. I mean, that's at the end of the day what data is supposed to help do is, inform you to make a more intelligent decision. But what it really does for us on the brand side, I think, is it allows us to really customize and make sharper kind of decisions, recommendations, partnerships that really should be custom in a way that is unique and ideally even ownable to whatever us on the brand side are trying to achieve, and can really only be done by fill in the blank, this brand, no one else. Ideally, that also would mean we stop kind of having conversations and get pitched packages that would be off the shelf. And it kind of moves you away from just, we'll slap your logo here and give you a billboard at the halftime report and put you on the LED sign. So it's really about, to me, I think it gives us data allows us to really kind of customize what we're trying to do for our business with our chosen partners.
It's great.
Well, unfortunately for the folks on the team or property side, it's made our jobs a lot harder. We went through an era where we really resisted the use of data and analytics as it related to sponsorship sales. One of the first things you're taught in Sales 101 is get to the decision maker, get to someone who can say yes, sell the passion, sell the sizzle, get the CMO or the CEO excited about the partnership with your brand and your team and your venue, and forget about the numbers. Don't let them talk numbers. That's for the TV and the radio and the digital folks. Stay away from numbers, because maybe you didn't want to know what the numbers actually said. You're selling an association and that sizzle. So it's made our jobs harder, but I think over the last 3 to 5 years, it's made us a lot smarter as well. And it's a space that we have to play in. We have to work with CMOs and CEOs who are using data just the way we are in the rest of our business for making smart decisions. So it's really, really important that we're able to listen to our clients, hear what they're trying to achieve, respond to their requests for data and information that the Red Sox or Fenway Park or Liverpool or Roush Fenway or whatever property we're working with, and then follow up appropriately. But it's certainly made the life of a sponsorship salesperson more difficult as we've come into this era. Interesting.
In Scott, as you sort of interestingly sit at the intersection of these two, I kind of like the way that this worked out in terms of seating order, because you've got brand, you've got property, but as you sort of sit at the intersection of that at Hookit in helping to expose some of the data to both sides, the brand and the property, what have you guys seen in terms of what you've been able to unlock in access to data and how it's used?
Yeah, Sam's going to hate me by the time this panel's over. Yeah.
Not if we could sell you something.
If you look back at the evolution of sports marketing and sponsorship, it really all kicked off with television back in 1939 with the first airing of a Major League Baseball game. And, television was historically the way that sponsorships were bought and sold, and that's where all the data was coming from and where all the value was coming from. And, our company, we've actually been around for 15 years, and, what we do today, we couldn't have done back in 2001. And, with the platforms that came into existence with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and all those, the media landscape has completely shifted. So when we started tracking athletes in our early days, we saw just how large their fan followings were. And in a lot of cases, the engagement that was being generated was significantly bigger than television. And there's so much data that you can extract from those platforms, it's almost scary at this point, because you can get all the engagement data, you can get audience data, which athletes are trending every single minute. And all of that data can be repurposed and repackaged to make both the buyer and seller sponsorship more intelligent.
Yeah. And Elizabeth, what are you seeing on your end of this sponsorships perspective?
Our philosophy is, quite frankly, I would probably start with challenging the question a little bit, because I believe that we've always had access to the data. Even back in the days when it was people with a clipboard asking you how you felt about a particular soda you were drinking in a ballpark. But we've always had access to the data. As the tools that we use to market to consumers change, obviously the data and the analytics have kept up with that, the new platforms, Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, and the social tools. But I think the bigger question is the contextualization of the data and making it matter. Like, you can have all the numbers in the world, but if they don't tell a story and help you understand how you're going to tell your brand story and reach your consumer, then every one of those numbers is completely and wholly irrelevant. So we spend the majority of our time at Wasserman focusing on that storyline, the contextualization, the to what end question. Like, I can have all the numbers in the world, but to what end? What am I going to do with that? And then the big component of that we're spending a lot of our time on, and we're seeing a lot in the industry in the last little bit, is the immediacy of it.
Yeah.
I'm not waiting. Overnights is not enough anymore. I need it now. I need it real time, and it's going to change. And data feeds that are 6 months old are useless.
Yep.
So we need to work on the real time, the immediacy, and the contextualization.
And how, Elizabeth, if we sort of double click on that for a second, how has these different mediums now for where brands can have participation and a voice and an opportunity to partner with the property, how have these different mediums affected what your clients that are on the brand side are coming to you and asking your help in negotiating with the property to get more of? Do they want the same amount of activation at the ballpark or at the arena? Do they want the same type of signage? Or are they looking more for those digital mediums where this is now quantifiable and they can start to track the results?
Both and. We always talk about data, and I'm a huge proponent of data, and we factor it into the underpinning of everything we do at Wasserman. But we cannot forget that we are in a passion-based industry. And when you are in a passion-based industry, it is the blend of head and heart, art and science. And so you have to have both. So I can have access to the data, I can have all these new tools and platforms, but there's nothing quite like sitting and watching a Red Sox game. Like, you have to be there and have to be in the moment. So the blending of both of them is the challenge that we get from our clients, the sort of mixed media optimization of it. Okay, where can I be? How can I be? When can I be? And that sort of science is showing up, who, what, when, where, and why, and then married with that real strong creative art message that you want to get across to your consumers.
And Sam, you were nodding your head. So is that what you're seeing in your conversations, your team's conversations with your brands and your partners as well, that they still want that balance, the sort of analog with the digital as well that's more quantifiable?
Definitely. It's what we see. And typically what happens in a traditional sponsorship relationship is you start dealing with folks who are looking at the data, they're looking at the numbers, does this make sense? And then you'll get into that's the head and then the heart, exactly as Elizabeth just laid out for you. There has to be that combination when you're trying to put together a deal that works for a brand and meeting their needs. Because if you were going off the numbers alone, I think it would be hard to justify a lot of the dollars that get spent in sports, period. And there's that sort of intangible that decision makers, I don't think they can quite put their finger on, why this deal may or may not make sense. And then it's our job to make sure that the relationship is there, and after the contract is signed, whether it's a 2, 3, 4, 10-year deal, we're saying yes to the client. We're following up, making sure that those intangibles help them drive sales and close deals.
Sure.
By having that relationship with the Red Sox. That's the way we think about it, because we want, when senior executives like these guys are checking their list and they're going through all the dollars they're spending, we want the Red Sox to be the last thing they cancel or get rid of. We want them to say, we have to keep the relationship with the Red Sox because they take such good care of our employees or our customers or our board of directors or whatever that intangible is. That's really the job. Once you make the deal, it's then living that deal together as you go forward in the relationship.
Yeah, the value is far greater to my organization than just the check that I write, by how you guys go above and beyond. So Pat, Bose has a number of partnerships, but a big partnership with the NFL, obviously. Talk a little bit about how you have approached the NFL as partners and what you guys have done to give better insights into how well that partnership is working. What data do you have access to that you didn't have access to perhaps before, or that you want more access to get a better sense of how well that partnership's working on both sides, for you guys and the league?
Yeah, and as you mentioned, we have quite a few partnerships above and beyond the NFL. We work with Formula One. We work with the United States ski and snowboard team. We work with different musicians and entertainers around the world, and the team does a really great job with each and every one of them. But with that being said, we treat each and every one of our partnerships with kind of a same, consistent approach. So whether it's something that's massive like the NFL or something that maybe is a bit smaller like US ski and snowboarding, I mean, it has to first and foremost come from a place of beyond the obvious business of, is this going to reach our consumer and all that, do we have a real authentic reason to be? Is Bose or supplying something to the property and ultimately to the fan, it's going to add a demonstrable improvement and benefit to them. So, in the case of the NFL, with the coach's headset and the noise canceling technology we've brought to the sidelines, we know has demonstrably improved how the coaches can communicate to one another. Working with all the players and the teams is also really important. Like, to only have the league deal wouldn't go far enough. We have to work with all the teams, quite a few handful of players, and kind of demonstrate more through a consumer lens, kind of how our products help them, do better at the game and prepare, whether it be traveling, exercise, relaxing, all that. So it's really kind of a full-faceted approach, but it's really grounded in, at the heart, there needs to be an authentic core reason for us to be there.
And when you, particularly with the NFL, how do you look at the success of that partnership, and particularly as it relates to the headphones during the games, the amount of exposure your brand gets because as a result of that? How do you guys gauge that success? Is it that you can track sales that go up? Is that a big part of it? Is it a part of understanding what your brand awareness is relative to the brand awareness of some of your competitors? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for NFL or anything else, and we take a real holistic look at it. Obviously, sponsorship by definition, and particularly big sponsorship, the token kind of statement is it's about awareness and reach, and absolutely that is part of it. But I also, it has to convert to sales at the end of the day. And as I've said a few times before, one of my favorite quotes is like, if they're aware but don't care, you're nowhere. So we really take that kind of full view of all the metrics, from kind of mass broad reach awareness to ultimately like transactional conversion.
That's great. So Scott, that's a good transition. It's a good bit about impressions, right? Impressions in the offline sense, but how much is my brand being seen? And what seems to be changing, we talked a little bit about it a second ago, but what seems to be changing in the business a little bit is how much perhaps engagement is now becoming as important as impressions. Because again, those engagements obviously can be tracked a lot. So can you talk a little bit about what you guys are seeing from a reporting perspective with the clients that you work with on engagement versus impression?
Yeah, so there's obviously going to be a place for impressions, forever, with channels like television and maybe print. And we've been waving the flag for years now that engagement's the currency of social media. Because why would you look at eyeballs or make assumptions on who saw an ad when you have all that engagement data of who engaged with a piece of content on which platform at what time and who else was promoted within it. So you've got all that data, so why not use it to make more intelligent decisions? And when we started our hook evaluation model 5 years ago, so we were really a pioneer in this space of quantifying sponsorship value from social and digital media. And our whole model was based on engagement. So rather than using an impression-based valuation model, we used an engagement-based valuation model because it was just a lot more tangible. And we knew who took action with what content, with which athlete or team or league, and we were able to roll all that up and provide that back to the brand. So I think over time, it's definitely resonating that if you've got engagement data, why not use it? Because you can figure out who those audiences are, and that's way more powerful than looking at eyeballs that are making assumptions on it.
And you guys work with brands across the globe, not just here in North America, but you work with brands all over. Can you touch a little bit on some of those brands, whether here or in other parts of the world, and how those insights around engagement have actually helped, be it the brand or be it the property?
Yeah, sure. So we work with a shoe brand that's here in town, and we did a really good analysis on, they wanted to compare all of the soccer clubs or global football clubs that they sponsor in Europe, and they did some analysis and comparison against another shoe brand and what engagement they were getting from their clubs. So what we found was, the insights that came out of it was really easy to identify which clubs were doing a great job of integrating the sponsor in with their content on social, which clubs were not doing a great job, and then some of the more interesting insights that came out of it was player involvement. So when we tracked the value of the teams, we were looking at the team itself as well as all the players. And in some cases, they had really strong participation from players that were also promoting the brand, and in other cases, they had none. So it just gave them a much better action plan on how they could go out and align and partner with those properties to do a better job.
That's great. And do you find that when you were working with the brand in these cases, and maybe you don't have a relationship with the property in question, let's say it's Formula One or it's a given team, does it give you an opportunity to then turn to the team and say, here's what we found that might be helpful to you as well, as you talk to not only this brand that we work with, but other brands as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our goal is that we're a third-party standard and a trusted source of data. So we have to be careful on how we work with both sides, but we're non-biased. So we'll share data with both sides of the desk. The important thing is, how they're using that data. Yeah. So there's a lot of virality in what we're doing because, in this case, we work with both the club and the brand, and they're both asking us different questions, and we're very sensitive to both of their needs.
Sure. Elizabeth, I want to stay on this topic of engagement and impressions for a second. Wasserman works really closely with its clients, particularly on the brand side, when it comes to managing the marketing budget every year and understanding the right uses of those marketing dollars. Mm-hmm. And I'd be curious to get your take of how you've seen brands shift their mindset away from just, I want big exposure for my brand and I want those impressions, to, I want impressions, but I also want some engagement as well. And I'm going to dedicate that to these social channels and these digital channels so that I get both engagement and the ability to quantify results. Just be curious in your conversations with brands how that's gone.
Well, we're marketers at our core, and I think marketers have a tendency to chase shiny objects from time to time. We get excited about the new platform or the new idea. And so I maintain, and what we maintain to our clients constantly, is it's not one size fits all. It's not either impressions or engagement. It's not either this or that. You need to stop chasing shiny objects and understand your own brand and your own business challenges and what tools that you have in your arsenal to address those challenges. So there are some brands, we've worked now for over 20 years with American Express. American Express is one of the most recognized brand marks on the planet. Everybody knows what the blue box is. So they don't need to spend a lot of time chasing awareness. But if they completely shunned impressions, the next time they launched a particular card product, that would be a challenge because that product may need awareness. So the brand or the challenge or the product that you're launching will dictate the tools that you use. It's not an either-or proposition. That being said, and again, back to the real time and the immediacy, the biggest opportunity that's in front of us as marketers is the real time immediacy of the one-to-one conversations you're having with your consumers. Now, the flip side of that is the one-to-one conversations they're having back if you do something inauthentic or something that they choose to have a voice about. So that's where we're focusing on the engagement is, again, to what end? It's not engagement for engagement or engagement over impressions for its own sake. It's to what end and what challenge are you trying to solve?
Sure. Sam, as we think about the changing practices of big companies and brands and spending their marketing dollars differently, ways that can be tracked and ways that perhaps they can drive direct conversion from, have you guys at the Red Sox, tough question because everybody wants to be associated with the Red Sox except for the Yankees, but everybody wants to be associated with the Red Sox. Have you guys found that that's changed the tenor of the conversations with the both prospective brands and the current brands that you work with, that they want to spend dollars differently and therefore don't want to spend as many of those dollars with you guys driving outfield wall impressions, or has that shift happened yet in your world?
I think it has, and I think that we've seen, fortunately, growth in our sponsorship base in terms of number of companies that want to work with the Red Sox. We've also seen growth in the dollar, the revenue achieved. So It has been an area of particular pride for us. But I would say that, again, it's getting harder and harder because you can't just sell a sign on the outfield wall. Pat and I were talking before. I mean, it needs to be a real, authentic connection and a relationship, and it has to drive sales. I mean, there's too much pressure on CMOs, VPs of marketing, agencies to get a big return on their investment. And it's interesting, as I thought about this group and this panel, you know, we don't know at the Red Sox. It's hard for us to put a rate card on something,
Sure.
right? Because we could tell you that sign on the Green Monster is worth $10 million a year. But it's not unless someone's willing to pay $10 million a year, right? So we have actually perfect information into what every piece of inventory we have is worth. Because if we've done our job and we've exhausted every single category, we know what the beer category is worth. We know what financial services is worth. We know what quick service restaurant is worth. And Elizabeth said it well. They're not all created equal. Every category is different for the same set of inventory, whether it's signage or digital or hospitality or engagement platforms when you get your players involved on social media and tying into a sponsorship. So we know, to the extent that we know what our deals are, we know what the market is for the sponsorship assets associated with the team. But we can't dictate to our clients what something is worth. Yep. They're going to tell us. And then it's our job to make sure that we're talking to absolutely everybody in the marketplace who may have an interest in being with us and decide, is it worth it to do an exclusive deal? You're going to carve up the category? How are you going to put that puzzle together to generate the most amount of revenue possible for your property? And we've seen it over the last five years getting harder and harder because that return is really required.
I would just jump in and for me personally and for our team, I mean, we really value engagement because that is a higher level, much more qualified kind of way to be connecting with your consumer and the fan. But I also would say, and I caution everyone in the industry of sports, like, don't try to constantly be what you're not, and like play to your strengths. And I think, you know, sports, generally speaking, is something that brings so many people together and unifies people together in large scale in a big way, and the reach it brings and the logo visibility it can bring. And at Bose, you know, we talk about it can't just be about the logo, it's got to be more than the logo. And I hear people in the office all the time say, it can't be a logo slap. But there is value to that. And I think it's important that we don't just like completely ignore reach and visibility and impressions and logos, because there is some inherent value that it works best when we're doing other things that can kind of extend a deeper connection with the fan.
That's a great point.
It is a core part.
That's a great point. I mean, as an industry, we enjoy a benefit that the vast majority of other industries don't have, which is such a high degree of sentiment for that brand that you're there, that team that you're there to be a part of, that game that you're attending, and
Sometimes too much sentiment.
sometimes too much sentiment. Yeah. But no, it's exactly right. There are opportunities that we continue to have in the sports space that are unlike any opportunities elsewhere. Where other places you can put your brand that aren't necessarily about engagement.
Yeah, just to chime in on Sam's comment about the pressure on CMOs, you know, one of the studies that we just saw was, you know, 80% of marketers are making measurement of ROI and ROO, return on objective, their number one priority this year. And when it comes to sponsorship measurement, only 35% of marketers are actually measuring it. And half of that group doesn't even have a standardized system to do it. So, you know, one of the things that we see is there's never really a budget allocated for measurement. And, you know, so the latest IEG report showed that, you know, 47% of brands spent 1% or less of their spend on measurement, and 27% spent nothing.
Wow.
So, you know, if you look at the way wealth managers work and ad tech and martech, you know, they're typically spending 2 to 3%, you know, on measuring returns on their funds and portfolios. So it's, you know, sponsorship buyers should be looking at it similarly.
I want to go back, Elizabeth, to a word that Sam used a second ago, and then Sam would love for you to chime in on it as well, which is category. We use that word a lot in our business, and particularly obviously related to sponsorships. And Sam, as you touched on, sometimes you make a category exclusive to a partner that you choose, and sometimes you split it up amongst multiple. But I'd be curious, what categories, Elizabeth, have you with your partners found that are new categories over the last several years? And have any of those new categories actually unlocked our ability to, again, find more data and drive more analytics because of those new categories?
Well, if there's one thing that I can unequivocally say I see in absolutely every property relationship when I talk to people like Sam is necessity is the mother of invention. And starting back in like the 08, 09, when the industry was somewhat challenged, I found our property partners got real damn creative about what they were willing to sell in order to make sure that their revenue stayed the right way. So whether it was the addition of new categories, like when the spirits categories were introduced to certain professional sports, or the addition of new assets like the jersey patch on NBA jerseys, people can get creative to find new revenue streams to counter what's happening in the industry. But I maintain it's not necessarily a category-specific insight, like it's not new categories that you're bringing, it's really more new platforms. I'm of the opinion that one day category exclusivity will be a thing of the past. It's not really necessary if you think about it. What's a better way to look at it if you are a brand is platform exclusivity. Because even if you look at the same category, and I would challenge a little bit what Sam said, we know what X category is worth, but if you take the credit card category, American Express is very different than Visa, is very different than MasterCard, is very different than the bank card. So even within a category, how they would look at investing in a partnership, how they would read the data about the affinity is going to be naturally, inherently very different. We work with Microsoft. I promise you the way Microsoft goes to market with the NFL is very, very different than the way any of their competitors would. So forget trying to balance against that and look at who you are as a brand, what you stand for, what the data is telling you about the affinity and the match between you and the partner and the consumer, and focus on that in a platform development. I don't care necessarily about keeping competitors out of a particular property. I care more about having complete and total ownership of the platform that speaks to my brand most effectively and gives me the most effective vehicle to talk to my consumers. I will own, for example, we work with Nationwide Insurance, and they have completely owned the Walter Payton Man of the Year with the NFL, celebrating people who give back to their communities. We very successfully negotiated them into the NFL when there was another insurance partner already there in USAA, and we convinced the NFL to actually split that and have two partners because we knew what platform we wanted as Nationwide, and USA had their platform with Salute to Service, and we knew how to operate differently, and it has not been a problem at all that we're sharing a category because we have our platform exclusivity. So I think categories is a thing of the past pretty soon.
It's interesting, Sam, are you sort of seeing the same thing on the team and property side, that the categories, as Elizabeth said, might be going away, exclusive categories might be going away of the past?
Yeah, we're seeing some of it in some categories, for sure. A good example, Frank Huckabone's here, just did a big new deal with Sam Adams.
Which may go down in history as the biggest no-duh sponsorship in all of history.
Well, thank you. Maybe we can do a contract extension right now. But it was really important to them in their category to maintain exclusivity and keep others out. The spirits category, which Elizabeth can attest, wasn't important with rum or bourbon or vodka or what have you. So you're able to sort of carve that up. So I agree, and it's our job to be mindful of what's going on out there in the market, and does category exclusivity really matter? One of the things we're seeing now in the sort of land-based casino category is that given the expansion of gaming here in Massachusetts, category exclusivity might not be as important. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. We're hearing that it might not, which would then open up a lot of opportunities for us with gaming coming in to Massachusetts. And the other thing I would say, just to your original question, technology is really changing our business in a dramatic way. I mean, if you would have told me just a couple years ago that we'd be generating significant money from a ride-sharing service, whether it's Uber or Lyft or fantasy daily gaming companies, you've got DraftKings and obviously FanDuel have their discussions, but you've got a lot of revenue coming into the industry. It's creating engagement. So technology is really, really helping the sports industry by creating new categories.
That's great. You know, we've talked a lot about different areas and viewpoints and angles of sponsorship over the last 20 minutes or so. And interestingly, we haven't talked about what sits at the center of all of this, which is the fan. The associations you have with your partners, the value that you drive, Sam, with your partners, and Elizabeth, what you in sort of serving, representing both, everything sort of points back to that fan and that fandom around our business. I'd be curious, Scott, what have you guys uncovered as you've driven and mined deeper analytics on fan behavior and fan activity? What have you guys actually uncovered that was maybe surprising? Surprising to you guys, surprising to the brand, and surprising to the property?
Yeah, so we, we've been tracking social now for about 5 years, and we track 500,000 entities across Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Weibo, VK, and we aggregate roughly 100 million social posts a month. And we analyze every single one of those for promotion of brands via hashtags, mentions, and then computer vision to find logos within branded content. And we perfected that kind of tool and that platform to be able to aggregate all that data. And then we started going deeper on what other data can we capture. And to your point, brands sponsor sports to get to consumers, and the consumers are the fans. And the athletes, teams, and leagues are just really channels to be able to get to those fans. And so the social platforms are so interesting because you can get so much audience data, and so who the follower base of a particular athlete or team or league is, and you can literally get a breakdown of gender and location and interests, other things that they're talking about that can help shape content strategies and how to target them more effectively. And one of the biggest things that we saw was looking at like NASCAR as an example. Their average or their median age demographic has been climbing, year after year, and it was kind of stressing them out. And when we brought them the social data, their engagement was significantly bigger than even the television stats, and the demographic was actually 20 years younger than the television audience, which is kind of obvious that they, didn't realize that the audience just really shifted. It didn't go away; it just moved.
And presumably they weren't activating against that audience,
No.
that younger audience as well.
Yep. Yeah, and on the category exclusivity piece too, if you look at IEG is a great resource for stats, but 98% of marketers are going to be using social media to activate their sponsorships moving forward, and it's the number 2 priority is getting access to content and rights for social, and it's number 2 only behind category exclusivity.
Wow.
I would add a little bit to what he's talking about here in terms of what you learn by studying the data and studying the numbers. And we have a proprietary platform at Wasserman called Unlock that takes a look at same thing, sort of the social media audience, the dynamics, the consumer, takes it one step farther and does a compare and contrast and matches it against particular brands versus properties and gives that real insight into audience overlap and segmentation and where you should go. And what we've noticed since launching the platform is people spend a ton of time looking at the wrong things. I think it's the legacy of impressions-based marketing. People will talk about X person who has 2 million followers, when in reality, the engagement of someone who probably has half of that may be higher. So they look for these like outlying metrics that don't actually really matter. One of my favorite examples is we studied a lot about the Olympics. We were watching all the Olympic athletes in Pyeongchang, and everybody was all enamored by the fact that Chloe Kim's social media following during the period of the Olympics rose over 2,500 percentage points, a massive number. Now, keep it in perspective, she went from 9,000 followers to 300,000, but regardless, it's still this massive explosion. But it was really not that mattered the most. If you really take it down and start looking at it, the 2 most interesting facts that came out of that, if you stop chasing the impressions of audience growth and look at the qualitative storyline and contextualization, the 2 things that came out of that were the most interesting is, as a result of that, her followers became 3 times less likely to be avid snowboard followers. That's actually a really good thing from a marketer. Yeah. For a marketer, is you're seeing indications that she's going beyond a niche sports and into more mainstream marketability. And during the same period, even though he has 10x the followers, she had double the engagement of LeBron James, if you compare and contrast. And he's a very high engagement factor on social media, as you know. Yeah. And she had double in the same period. So if you stop looking at the huge numbers and chasing the volume and really get down into unlocking those really interesting insights, that's where the storyline and the context comes from.
Just to build on that, I mean, I think it's what I'm really fascinated about these days and think a lot about is the dimension and definition of who is a fan, I think is going through like rapid change. And it's not just about who's actually sitting and watching the game, and I think we know that's probably decreasing in some ways. But in a lot of ways, people are becoming fans of Chloe Kim or the Red Sox and whatnot, and they might not actually be a baseball fan or a snowboarding fan, and they might never actually watch the event, but yet they still are a fan because through social media and other kind of communication channels, they're hearing about these things and starting to like these things. So that it's really interesting how it's changing, like what defines a fan. I think from an analytics perspective, I mean, how we start to kind of measure and dissect that is going to be really fascinating.
Yeah. And the value of that fan versus the connection with that fan versus just a connection with a regular consumer
Yep.
that isn't necessarily a fan of the team or the league that you've associated yourself with. So a lot of that was rooted in socials. Scott, talk a little bit about how the social channel itself has become much more prevalent in these discussions between brands and properties, and kind of where you see that going.
Yeah, so we, a lot of the properties that we're working with now are developing really comprehensive content marketing strategies or campaign strategies for their sponsors. So it's not uncommon for a brand to be a league-wide sponsor, but then also have content marketing series that are very specific. So Major League Soccer did a really good job with AT&T, where they're a league-wide sponsor, but then they have AT&T Goal of the Week. So they were able to pull together the top 10 goals every single week, and then built an entire campaign around that. And they're able to track that separately from the league-wide value. So we see sponsors getting a lot more creative to figure out ways to get more integrated in an authentic way with the social channels and really get their message out across that way.
Do you see one channel that has become more popular than the other, or is more requested by the brands to be a part of, be that a conversation on Twitter, Snap, Facebook?
Yeah, so it varies by sport. So a lot of the mainstream sports, the big five, still heavily focus on Twitter, and we just don't see as much engagement coming from it. I think there's a lot of noise. It's just a constant feed of tweets, and whereas most of the engagement's happening on Instagram and Facebook. So I think as people are seeing the data and seeing the reports and knowing where the audiences are and where they're engaging, they're developing much more comprehensive strategies for those two platforms.
Yeah.
But yeah, even last year, 60% of all the value that we tracked happened on Instagram, and 30% was on Facebook.
Wow.
So that just gives you kind of a sense. But if you get into particular sports, oftentimes Facebook will be the #1 value driver, and then followed by Instagram.
So we've got a little less than 5 minutes left. It's my favorite part because I don't have to ask any more questions. They've asked the questions that I can now ask. And we've got an interesting one here. We've got many interesting ones here, and we'll try and get to as many as we can, crew. But one is, and Sam, I'm gonna point this one in your direction. So this is an interesting. Should brands encourage properties to include variable fee structures, such as bonuses for attendance or sponsorship awareness KPIs?
Yeah, no. No, they shouldn't. And I'll tell you why. When we went to the World Series in 2004, when we went to the World Series in 2007, when we went to the World Series in 2013, we didn't come looking for a bonus payment. So we've had clients raise that, and we're not willing to go down that path. We're not willing to set that precedent because we believe it's a partnership. We believe you're associated with the Red Sox in the good times and in the bad times. We're going to have some years where we draw 2.8 million people. We're going to have some years where we draw 3.1 million people. We're going to have some years where we're maxed out on national television. We're going to have other years where the team takes a dip and ratings are down. So we have had clients raise that, and I understand. I understand the TV business, digital, radio. You're selling make goods and you're guaranteeing rating points. We go into our sponsorship agreements and our partnerships with a negotiated agreement, and then when the season unfolds, we're in it together through good or through bad.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm gonna, Elizabeth, come down to the end of the line with you, and this one's kind of an interesting one. What advice would you give to an expansion team or a new franchise looking to create initial partnerships, especially with no data to establish pricing or value?
It's actually a challenge we addressed just this year. talking about a particular team's move to Las Vegas. So I would challenge the fact that there's no data, right? If you really have the ability to understand and dig in at the tools, you understand where not only you have a built-in audience, but you can use that data to actually direct how to create and manufacture an audience. Because even if you haven't been in a particular team or a particular market, there is a base of fandom there. And if you can get into that and understand why and who and how to model that audience, you can create your own momentum and you can create your own storyline. So not being data is never a problem. We are, one of my favorite quotes of all time, we are drowning in data. We are starving for those insights. That applies to everything, including not only profiling your existing audience, but in cases like this, manufacturing your own new audience.
Yeah, that's a great point. So we've got less than 2 minutes here, so we'll try and go maybe 30 seconds each. We've talked a great deal about the advancements we've made as an industry in the last few years at getting better at understanding what results we can drive from sponsorships, but we still have a long way to go, right, in understanding the data and really the insights that come on the other side of it. So what in your mind, and we'll start with you, Pat, what in your mind are the next big things to come down the pathway of sponsorship analytics?
I think really drilling into the fan and getting beyond just the traditional avid versus casual. Like I said before, I think the way people consume and interact with the teams, the leagues, and the media that covers it is so myriad. And like I said, a lot of people can actually be a fan and never watch a game. In an ironic way, even though the game is more available than it's ever been through a variety of channels and platforms, it's actually harder to watch games because we're all so busy and distracted, and to sit down for a couple hours, week after week, night after night, it's getting harder and harder. So I really hope someday we'll have a much greater, frankly, granular definition of what fan means.
Yeah.
Yep. I would say it's going to be a doubling down on real, authentic relationships between human beings. I just have, it's hard to believe I started in baseball. Basically, I'm not that old, by the way. And I started before teams had websites. I think the internet was just sort of popping up. No Twitter, no Snapchat, no Facebook, no Instagram. And I believe that brands and properties and agencies, at the end of the day, we all still have to work together and be able to pick up the phone and talk to each other and look each other in the eye, have difficult conversations through face-to-face communication as opposed to an email or a text. And I think you're going to start to see with the explosion, the proliferation of all this content and information that's coming our way, the real relationships will win the day. Because when you need each other and you're able to pick up the phone and have that partnership, that will be what matters, and that will be what separates true sponsorship relationships from the others.
Right.
Yeah, in terms of sponsorship analytics and measurement, we really see two areas. You made a comment about the just overflow of data, and so first is unified measurement. We talked to one club in Europe, a football club that had 22 different vendors and tools that they were using to hobble together data to understand the value that they were providing. So I think a single platform that combines television, social, digital, and other sources of data that are provided by the user are going to be, for a single dashboard, is going to come into play here really soon. The second piece is what we call SponTech. Sponsorship is one of the few categories that you have large volumes of transactions being done, and it's not influenced by technology and data at this point yet. And if you look at markets like ad tech and martech and fintech, it's programmatic buying now, and as a result, all of the data that we were sitting on, we spent years figuring out how to aggregate it, and now we're spending all of our time on data science and data analysts, and really using that data to take things from a responsive approach to more of a proactive and predictive approach. So I think the way that sponsorship buying will be done in the near future will be more predictive, more prescriptive, using all of that data, and it's all a result of machine learning and AI, and it's going to transform the way that sponsorships are bought and sold.
So as much as Sam wants to have one-to-one conversations with humans, he's just going to be talking to machines the next 10 years. Elizabeth, take us out.
Look, I get asked this question a lot. What's the next big thing to come in this industry? What's the next big advancement in sponsorship and analytics? And I've been at this for a long time. I am old, Sam. But there will always be advances in the technology. Like we said, data is not the issue. We're drowning in it. There will always be advancements in, I agree with you, mixed channel or cross-channel measurement, the immediacy, real-time of that ability to take the Nielsen-esque approach across the entire plethora of channels that measure the effectiveness of a sponsorship message. All that's going to be there. Improvements in visualization and other things will accompany that as well. But I think what we have to do in searching for all this data, what we have to remember is what we're doing it for. And what we're doing it for is to attract new consumers and fans and to keep the ones we have and engender loyalty for them. So when we look at the robustness of that audience, I think the biggest thing that's going to come out of the next few years in our industry is you people. Like, I look at this room and I see, unfortunately, very little female representation, very little representation from people of color, very little of the reflection of what the audiences that we're targeting look like. And I think as that begins to change, that's when you're really going to see the advancements of how we're using the data to reach those new consumer bases. And that's the thing that I hope to see in the next 5 years.
Great. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Let's give the panel a good round of applause.